Welcome to the fifth show of Sectorverse. Today we have Aryaman with us, who's going to speak a lot about PropTech industry in India. He's going to talk about how exactly the industry has evolved over time, from the beginning of say housing.com, then the likes of Anrock, and today we have likes of Meyer Capital, which kind of helps us invest in real estate tech. He's going to speak a lot about how exactly the times have been, how exactly the times are, and how exactly times are going to be. So, Aryaman, could you just start off talking about yourself, your journey from the US? I believe you studied at UPenn, and then you worked for a bit amount in investment banking, VC, and how did this journey how did the journey take place as such?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Shreyans. So, I'll start from the very beginning. Real estate has been something that has been part of, I guess, my high school has been part of my, journey, even up to college. So both my parents are in the real estate industry. I mean, every dinner table conversation is sort of around real estate. The basis is real estate. So, I've sort of grown up around it. My interest has been in it. That being said, on the other hand, I've always been a techie. I've always been into my gadgets. So essentially at UPenn, when I went there, I got an opportunity to explore the technology side of things. It was very different initially than what I had anticipated it to be, but it gave a very diverse sort of, perspective into the sort of possibilities that can be integrated into, various sort of verticals. Not necessarily real estate, but technology is sort of applicable pretty much everywhere today, especially in a time like this. So, when I was going through my education, I spent a lot of time taking classes from Wharton because technology in itself is a very strong tool, but without application, it sort of remains, or the benefits of it cannot be explored to the full extent. So in order to sort of figure out where I'm going to use the technology that I've learned about, I started exploring the finance part of things. To get more experience, yes, like you said, I worked at SoftBank, Moelis. Once I thought I had the experience, pretty much at the start of lockdown, I was looking at an opportunity that sort of was at the intersection of my three core interests, being real estate, finance, and technology, and that's where this whole concept started from.
Very interesting journey. The fact that you came to the US and then you saw the real estate market in the US, which is a lot more mature, and then you picked up your insights, and then you came back to India, did a fair amount of work. But yeah, like you said, right, you started off with a real estate company. I'm kind of curious, what exactly does this real estate tech company do today, and what are the product offerings?
Sure. So just to give you a little bit of background first, the reason why real estate or commercial real estate in India has attracted a lot of foreign investment, in fact, it's attracted some of the largest funds globally, is because of the sort of return profile. So, in real estate, you can earn only from rental income, which is backed by long-term leases with MNC tenants, so very secure. 15-year leases. You can earn a 10%, 11% average over the tenure. Now, when you compare that to other sort of asset classes, debt, equity, fixed income, a return which is this secure, monthly distributed, cash flow product is rare to find, especially in a sort of COVID impacted economy. So that's the basic, value proposition that we wanted to take to the Indian audience. What has been happening in India is that essentially a lot of this commercial real estate is very expensive to own, and it's even harder to operate. So it's not like a residential apartment that an individual who doesn't have expertise in the space can just buy and hope to sort of make the asset perform over its tenure. So 85 to 90% of all commercial real estate, or at least A-grade ones, were being owned by your foreign funds, your NRIs. There was minimal participation from your retail investors in India. So the way we look at things is that India is a growth story. It's known around the world. I mean, today India is one of the strongest growth stories globally, given the sort of IT sector booming, MNCs moving in, more and more sort of outsourcing, knowledge outsourcing centers moving to India. Recently, I believe EY moved theirs globally to India. So a lot of these MNCs are moving to India. And to be part of that growth story, to be part of real estate, it's important for the Indian audience to also get an equal opportunity to participate in these institutional grade, lucrative A-grade commercial real estate properties. Now, the main barrier has, of course, been that property usually, which sort of classifies in this category, starts at 40 crores, 30 crores. Now, an individual rarely has that sort of money. More importantly, even if he has 50 crores, let's assume, he may not have the risk appetite to have concentrated funds, in one property. So traditionally, what has happened is that people informally got together, a bunch of 7 to 10 friends maybe, or 5 family members, and they sort of formed an informal consortium and invested in the property. That, of course, has its own challenges. More often than not, an individual cannot find this consortium. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to sort of operate because there's no sort of overarching person who's taking responsibility to manage it day to day. So it's not worked out, this traditional model. And what we are essentially doing is we are making the whole asset class accessible to retail investors. So the way we are doing that is, we manage, we form, we identify investors for a particular opportunity. People can invest in as low as 25 lakhs in these, 40, 50 crore opportunities. We identified 100, 200 like-minded individuals who are keen on investing in that asset. And we essentially manage it for them end to end. So for an investor, it's as simple as, giving us the 25 lakhs or becoming a fractional owner for 25 lakhs in a certain property, and essentially reaping the upside until he wishes to exit.
Very interesting. So you mentioned the fact that there can be a retail participation, and you also mentioned that 25 lakhs is the base. Or 25 lakhs is like the minimum amount, right? So why do you have that 25 lakhs as a parameter, and why not any other amount per se?
Sure. So the way we are looking at this is, so let me take a step back. What we advise our investors is, if 25 lakhs is their total investable amount, then they shouldn't enter real estate. Maybe they should put 5 lakhs in FDs, 5 lakhs in stocks. But usually people who have 25 lakhs to invest into real estate, they are doing it more from a fixed income perspective, right? So we want long-term investors. Real estate is not an asset class where the value is going to uptick within 2 weeks. You have to be patient. You'll get your rental income, but to realize capital appreciation, you have to give it 2 years, 4 years. So essentially, when you have very low ticket sizes, 50,000, 1 lakh, 5 lakhs for that matter, the sort of sophistication or the mindset of the investor is not consistent, with what we are targeting. So to that end, we need a patient audience. We need an audience, who has that patience to enable us to provide them, the performance that they anticipate from this sort of investment opportunity.
Nice, interesting. So today you have a product where a retail investor can directly come and invest, right? What kinds of properties do you look into?
Sure. So this is where it actually gets a little interesting. So what we are doing is, we are not only taking standard commercial real estate opportunities that are open in the market. Given our background and expertise in real estate, we are very, very well versed with the real estate network. And as you probably know, real estate is a relationship-based, profession. Very seldom will you find an itinerary of, let's say, 500 deals which you can pick from. Deals are scattered, and unorganized. So to identify these deals, it requires some level of understanding of how real estate market works. So that's essentially the way we choose our assets. We bring those properties to our platform. That, let's assume that even if you have the money, such properties are not accessible on the market. These properties are usually picked up by our funds long before any retail investor even realizes that this was available. So essentially, we are sort of bridging that gap. We are getting those institutional grade opportunities, offering them to retail investors at affordable investment amounts, and providing them access to something or a set of properties that they otherwise wouldn't.
Interesting. Could you name such properties? Like, are they hotels? Are they in terms of say warehouses, etc. Apart from like say commercial real estate as such, could you just name a few and list your top properties as such across India?
Sure. So, our first few offerings, I mean, I can tell you about them. Our first offering was in Maker Max City, BKC in Mumbai. That development in itself commands the highest rental in the country. It's in fact a development that we've designed. We've done the master planning of. It was developed about 10, 15 years ago, 15 years ago. Reliance owns 85% stake, which tells you a lot about the stability, the quality, and essentially it's institutionally owned and run. Private investors, retail investors have never been given the chance to acquire something there. So a lot of people consider Maker Max City even a trophy property. So to specify, trophy properties are ones where people are willing to pay a premium just to own that asset. So, Maker Max City is one of the most A-grade assets, one of the most marquee assets in the country. In fact, it's the only development or one of the few developments that have maintained a close to 0% vacancy rate, irrespective of COVID. No tenant has vacated because they know once they vacate, they will not get placed there again. That's the sort of demand you have for this development. Now, our second opportunity was in Magarpatta, Pune. Just to give you a brief background, Magarpatta is an integrated township. It's one of the very few completed townships at the heart of Pune. Often these townships are located in suburbs, peripheries, but Pune developed around Magarpatta. So the way Magarpatta is organized is there are 12 office towers and everything in the 450 acres apart from that is residential sort of hospitality malls. So the way we look at it is that those 12 towers have very high demand, will continue to have high demand because the residents of Magarpatta come there to work, right? So there's a very limited chance that remain vacant because the demand is there. So just to tell you a little bit about the performance, irrespective of COVID, we haven't had a single tenant ask for a discount. That's the sort of asset quality we go for. Because when you own good properties, the tenant does not have the sort of upper hand whereby he can demand things. If he vacates, another tenant is already waiting in line. But to get such opportunities, you have to compete with the likes of PNB, MetLife Insurance, Max Life Insurance. These are the different kinds of owners in these developments. Now, we are targeting data centers, warehouses, hospitals. We are going to be expanding into a lot of different verticals. We are very excited about our next opportunity. It is going to be something which retail investors have not had access to previously, or in fact, even institutional investors have had limited access to.
You have also mentioned, that you are just starting off into secondary markets as well, right? So in terms of how exactly, say, primary markets and secondary markets work in real estate, could you just, kind of tell our viewers how exactly or how different is it as such?
Sure. So, secondary markets is a very interesting concept. It has penetrated every asset class in India and globally for that matter, except real estate to a great extent. Real estate is an asset class that continues to remain illiquid, and I'll touch upon that in a moment. But secondary markets have been very successful. They've been the means to provide liquidity to unlisted assets, unlisted sort of shares as well. So secondary markets is a proven concept to provide liquidity or address liquidity at least. The way we look at secondary market in the context of real estate is that, when you go and try to sell a 50 crore property, it's going to take you 6 months, 1 year to identify a buyer, close the deal, complete the transaction. When you're operating at 25 lakh rupee ticket sizes, your target segment becomes, or your customer base becomes all the more larger. So, getting that liquidity is exponentially easier. For example, one of our investors wanted liquidity. We were able to get it for him in 6 hours. So 25 lakhs is a price point which makes the whole liquidity aspect much easier to address.
Sure. I think now we've got a good idea of how exactly your company is positioned in India in terms of real estate investing. We've got an idea of how retail registration takes place. But this gives a good segue to understand this whole sector of prop tech and real estate tech, understanding how the investments work, understanding how other business model works, right? Because India is very new in this, and it's not a proven concept in India yet. and the story is long as such. So by my understanding, the US REITs is probably one of the the biggest or the biggest REITs in by far in the world, and it's a very proven concept. Institutional investors have latched onto the US REITs for quite some time, and the biggest private equity players hold some of the biggest properties in the world, right? Why is REITs not all that big in India, and how long? We just have two REITs, right? And how long would you see those REITs giving their returns to their investors, and what does the future look like in India?
Sure. So, in US, because US is a developed economy, REITs have been prevalent for a lot longer. So the regulations have enabled individuals to set up REITs, to run REITs, launch REITs. Whereas in India, that sort of regulation has only been permitted, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years. So in 3 years, we've launched, 3 REITs in India, A+ REITs. Some of the largest funds have sponsored them. Blackstone, Brookfield, these are the sort of funds coming into India, setting up these REITs. There's a considerable number of REITs in the pipeline. I'm very confident in the next 4 years, you're going to see a sort of exponential increase in the number of REITs in the country. Their return is phenomenal. Commercial real estate in general, this is the first time, pretty much you can say in Indian history, whereby retail investors are being given this opportunity in this asset class. They've participated everywhere, FDs, equity, residential. Commercial was the one asset class that, had very high barriers to entry. REITs are enabling participation. The regulations are making it easier for such REITs to operate in the country. Another interesting parallel is also, fractional ownership. The largest platform in the world, Cadre in the US, today manages 21,000 crores. In India, we are at a very nascent phase. We are a developing economy. Regulations are catching up. The sort of structures are catching up. But you've seen a lot of traction in the last 3 years into commercial real estate since, this has become feasible for the investors to participate in.
Right. So, let's take a step back and understand retail participation, right? Investing in something like real estate, at least in India, you require a lot of cash in terms of we just mentioned about 25 lakhs, right? But say in the equity markets, right? Today, equity markets have gone down even, beneath their actual value of stock, right? You can invest in fractional shares as such. Why would, retail investors who are just starting off in India with an average age of 27 think of investing in real estate when the equity markets are just hitting their or have hit their golden years, right? Why does real estate seem so amusing?
Sure. So, number one, Indians love real estate. You ask any person, he owns an apartment somewhere, shop somewhere, Indians like real estate. It has done well, it's performed great, it's appreciated well over the last 10 years. So that's one of the, driving factors. But more importantly, from a wealth perspective, it's never smart to have all your eggs in one basket. So I'm not saying that equity is better than real estate or real estate is better than, let's say, FDs. Each asset class comes with a risk return profile. Now, there's no asset class where you'll get, low risk, extremely high returns, or, very low returns and extremely high risk. That sort of disbalance, it's not there. And if there was such a discrepancy, then there would be arbitrage, and that discrepancy, would over time shrink. So at the end of the day, it's about allocation of funds. Now, there are essentially 3 or 4 different, verticals you can look at: equity, your sort of debt markets, fixed income, and alternative investments. So, in fixed incomes and debt, now let's pick up those 2 verticals. Your returns today are 4%, 5% in FD. Your corporate bonds are giving you, 8, 9%. The thing about real estate is that you get, 10% average over a sort of life cycle of a tenant as rental yield, and it's given to you every month. There are very few wealth products that will give you distribution every month. Now, people are liking this because, they can pay their EMIs. Some NRIs have parents who they want to send monthly money to. So they, make this investment in their name. They get monthly steady cash flow. And the best part about real estate is, unlike other debt products, you have a equity-like upside with capital appreciation. So if I invest in a bond, I know that yes, I will get my fixed income. Or if I, invest in a corporate bond, but there's no additional upside. If the corporate bond is giving a 10% coupon, it's giving a 10% coupon. You can't make 11%. The thing with real estate is, yes, you're making the 10-11% from rental, but if the property appreciates, as it has been, very easily you can touch 17-20% IRRs.
Yeah, I think we have touched a very important point with the fact that the ability of Indians kind of investing in real estate because they like it, right? But a lot of Indians actually believe that, okay, if they have a real estate property, they own the whole stuff, right? So how would you convince the fact that you are owning a property but a fractional of it?
Yeah, so what we are telling our investors, we're trying to educate the market. So residential real estate has been the go-to sector when people think about real estate because the price points are affordable. Right, in 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, you can go out and buy an apartment. Whereas in 10-15 lakhs in commercial real estate, you won't get anything. So what we are telling our investors is that your current mindset tells you that go and buy 3-4 apartments. It's not as though you're going to get any income from those 3-4 apartments. Even if you lease it out, it'll be to an individual person who might leave. It's unstable sort of rental inflow. Furthermore, your rental is 1 to 2%, annually. So your returns are not that significant. In this case, we are taking the entire headache of managing the property for you. You're becoming a proportional stakeholder with like-minded people, right? So we are doing it end-to-end for you. Your returns are still correlated to a real estate, asset class, but commercial, which you haven't had access to. So, in either case, in the residential model, they're not living in 4 homes simultaneously. So, in commercial real estate, even though the mindset is, they want physical space, I think that by telling them about the differentiation or at least the drastic spread in returns, they do understand that this is a very interesting option at the very least.
Sure. So as we know, this whole fractional investing in real estate, I believe there are a lot of models, right? REITs is one of them that we already discussed, where public can directly invest through it. Fractional investing like yours, I can come in private and invest with you. There's also something like a crowdfunding as such, right? How different are these 3 structures or financial products that are created, and what are the pros and cons of each of them?
Sure. So I'll start with the REIT. So the way a REIT is structured, it's like a mutual fund of stocks, right? So there's a basket of properties. Some of them are A+ grade, 100% occupied. Some of them are on a highway, literally falling apart. Maybe has 10%, 20% occupancy. But the point is that this is a pooled set of properties. When you're investing into a REIT, you probably don't know, who your tenants are. I mean, there are hundreds of tenants. There are, many, many properties. So to that end, it's more like taking a bet on the overall real estate sector, right? You're not betting on a specific property. Whereas when you invest in our model through fractional, what we are suggesting is there's this one property. It has this one tenant, right? So your returns are linked to this tenant. This tenant has signed a lease for 15 years. These are the terms of the lease. And this is the anticipated appreciation of this property. So to that end, it's more akin to buying your own property. Now, to put that into context as to why someone would do that, in the US, like you had previously mentioned, REITs have been existent for far longer. But people, even today, there's a fair share of money that people put into buying real estate property directly, right? So there's that distinction of knowing one property that you're owning, or knowing that there's a pool of properties pan-India in which you are owning something, with a lot of tenants and things like that. So this is the main difference. Another important difference is that in REITs, you get a lot of liquidity, right? It's a listed commodity. The downside of liquidity is when you have listed, equities such as REITs, it's subject to a lot of volatility. Now, let me, give you an example to put that in perspective. So at the start of COVID, right, a lot of these REITs have MNC tenants. MNC tenants do not very easily default on their leases. So the first REIT in India, Embassy, they had a 99% rental collection, which essentially means no one vacated, right? But the stock price fell by 30%. Now that isn't commensurate with the sort of performance that they were delivering at that point. But because of, a lot of retail speculation, the stock price is subject to volatility. Whereas in our scenario, it's not a listed commodity. So your sort of property price is linked to that particular asset. It's not as volatile. So, it's much more, it's a much better preservation of capital.
Now that we've touched upon the idea of the US and the models being brought to India, right? When I spent my time in the US, I realized that a lot of companies, and I'm sure even you have seen the amount of real estate tech companies that have come out, right? All of them are listed. Most of them are at least are listed now because post-COVID, we saw Compass, we have Opendoor. So those have a very, a multi-site business model. They don't look at just one area and they focus on it, right? But the idea of them starting off in one area was large, right? For example, Compass went ahead and listed out houses as such. And in India also, we've had similar companies, but they've not done all that well in India as such. Opendoor has the same thing of listing houses and it has other features as such. What do you see the opportunity in India in terms of listing houses for purchase, for leases, for rentals, and for selling on the internet? And where does this go for Indians to do that?
Sure. So, India is a very interesting market. PropTech is a nascent industry in India. Now, I'll take a step back and talk about the demographics of India. Now, 50% of the Indian population is, below the age of 25, which means that this 50% has not been buying apartments, has not been investing into, commercial. They have not been buying REITs. Now, this affects the overall demand, right? So for these PropTech platforms to do well, there has to be demand. So a lot of PropTech platforms have done well. That being said, with this, increasingly sort of young workforce coming into the, working class, that demand will continue to increase. When you see such a large segment of your demographics stepping into the working class, the demand for office space will shoot up, right? So that's the basic premise of how this works.
So there is this one side of listing properties on the web. There's one side of you buying these properties, or one side of leasing the properties. But I'm sure PropTech and real estate tech is a lot more than that, right? The idea that technology has come into it, the idea of collecting data of real estate asset classes, of the rental income in a given area, the square feet per price in a given area, and much of it is actually very structured around the world because they have all these uniformity across all their states or all their at least most of their major cities themselves, right? There is this government that collects all the data and uniforms it. But in India, the uniformity actually is not all that there, right? It's very unstructured. Because of which a lot of these data companies that can be potentially started off in real estate are not actually starting off. So what do you see in terms of the power of data that we can collect, the power of doing machine learning models and seeing valuation models as such? How exactly will this unlock the potential in India?
Sure. So data exists in India, data exists in the US. The main difference is in the US, it's been very organized, it's been structured, it's been communicated in such a form that retail investors or any individual for that matter has access to the same level of data. So there's no real discrepancy. I mean, for example, a fund manager in real estate in the US, from a data perspective, will have minimal, upside of benefit from a retail investor. I mean, a retail investor will have access to the same data. In India, what happens is getting access to this data is very difficult because, like you said, it's unorganized. Now that data does exist. It's not as though it doesn't exist. It's a matter of, aggregating from different platforms. It's a matter of doing due diligence. You have to do physical inspection because sometimes the data is not sanitized. Like you said, machine learning, over time, you have to start using NLP algorithms to read lease agreements in real time, and things like that. So the data part in India is what is the main differentiator between why an individual cannot go out and invest in a property himself and why they should hire an expert to guide their investment process, so that the expert, the sort of real estate manager, can bring in that extra layer of data, can help them make an informed decision. This also sort of tracks back into a lot of people in India do tend to say, I've burnt my hands in real estate. The reason for that is they step into real estate, they think that they can go ahead with an investment without really having the right data points in place, without really having an expert in place. And that's where the whole mindset is, or at least traditionally has been flawed. Because like any other profession, when you have a medical problem, you go to a doctor. When you have a legal issue, you go to a lawyer. When you want to acquire real estate, participate in this asset class, you need to have a real estate expert who does it full time, helping you, guiding you, informing you of the different data points.
Very interesting, right? There are companies like Yardi, Comstack, which does this whole dirty work and presents it in a nice way for the users to use that and kind of see the properties where they can invest, how they can invest, and build on that arbitrage as such. Taking a step back and just having a generalized view of this real estate. Like, we're not talking about investing. We're just talking about if there's someone out there who thinks that real estate is an opportunity, as we know that we discussed today. There must be something that he can integrate some kind of technology with it, right? Be it VR, be it something in construction tech, which blends with real estate tech really well. Something in the whole machine learning, like we've spoken, right? What is it that few thoughts that you think that people out there who are exploring to start up today can initially begin with and build models in India for the Indian market in real estate?
So there are many technologies. I could talk endlessly about it, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the few interesting concepts that we are working on. There's this concept called data mapping, which essentially is, when a country develops, you can usually map it to another developed country. Like, for example, US has Silicon Valley, right? In India, somewhat parallel would be Bangalore. US has New York as the financial district. Indian's equivalent is Mumbai, right? Washington, DC, Delhi. These are, I wouldn't say exact comparables, but this is enough data. And when you combine many countries and try to figure out a trend or pattern, this is where those insights come in from, right? Like, if you observe, a lot of the development in cities, for example, happens around airports. Now in Bangalore, the airport is situated 1 hour away from the city. What is going to happen in time, as per our analysis, is that the area around the airport is going to really develop. That's going to become the prime Bangalore. Again, this is over a 10-20 year horizon. But the point is, real estate is a long-term product. So getting insights like this enables us to get into deals whereby we can make an informed decision about where that property is going in the future, basis data and basis this data mapping. So the more data you have, the more machine learning you can run. It's a never-ending process. We are constantly sort of aggregating data sets, constantly putting overlying algorithms on it. So that's one of the very interesting technologies. From a consumer-facing perspective, technologies such as 3D virtual tours, that's become increasingly popular today in times when site visits are not, as easy anymore because of these lockdowns. So you get a very, very realistic render, a 3D render, which you can sort of, tour through your computer or through a screen, sitting remotely. One of the leaders in the space is Matterport. They are doing something like this. We are bringing something like this to our platform. So investors can, sit remotely, see the properties we're offering them, not only for the outside, but also the inside. And these are very, very realistic renders. So the scope is a lot. We are integrating a lot into our platform. We've got automated KYC now, bank verification, a lot of things that go into real estate. We are trying to integrate it end to end.
I think it was a pleasure knowing the fact that that is another asset class apart from equities, bonds, where people can directly invest. And I'm sure the listeners and the viewers have learned. And hopefully the whole 25 lakh margin comes down so that even they can start investing, right?
No, most certainly. That's the goal.
For sure. On the lighter note, we would probably just slid in and speak a lot about your other likings apart from real estate. And this segment is called the lighter note. It's like a conversation that we had, very candid. I think this is also very candid. So if I can start, I would probably go and ask, which is that one founder that you'd admire, and can be in any sector.
So one of the founders, I think has done a fantastic job. In fact, he's a very, new founder. Well, he's had a startup before, but Nikhil Agarwal, he's running Grip Invest. It's a platform that started relatively the same time as us, but the kind of outreach, the kind of scalability that he's achieved, it's really impressive. He's running a similar sort of wealth tech platform. And I know how challenging it is to onboard investors even at 25 lakhs, because investors have an overhead cost. He's doing it at 20,000 rupees. So there's a lot to learn from him. He's a second-time founder. Another founder who's really, really inspiring is, of course, Kunal Shah, Cred. He's done a fantastic job. I mean, his marketing skills are something which I'm yet to pick up things from. But yeah, these two founders have really shown that you can truly scale a business to the masses. You can take a wealth product, distribute it to retail investors, and you can do it in a very organized fashion with tech and minimal or at least a lean team.
Sure, for sure. I think both of them are doing really well. The second one is what is the best place to start up today?
So this is an interesting question, because I actually, when we launched Maya Capital, we launched in NCR. I did move to Mumbai shortly afterwards, and we shifted our head office there. The point is, when you're going after, especially a tech platform, when you're going after tech talent, finance talent, you have to be in Mumbai, Bangalore. A lot of the tech people want to be in Bangalore, but not having a base in Mumbai puts you at a disadvantage when dealing in finance, real estate. Mumbai is the heart of this asset class.
All right. Which is more important for you, scalability or profits?
So that's a very fine line. We strongly believe in maintaining at least a stable P&L, if not profitable, with sustained growth. We are not looking at exponential growth, because that's what leads to instability. So essentially, what we do is we try growing organically. We've stayed away from VC funding so far, primarily because of this reason. We want to ensure that we are self-sufficient, so that it gives us the flexibility to only provide quality. We don't have to chase, we have to do so many properties in this year because that's our break even. That's not the mindset, especially when you're offering wealth product. Your level of responsibility is exponentially higher. You're responsible for other people's funds. So growth and wealth, they usually don't go well hand in hand. So we do focus on P&L, but yes, growth is definitely important.
As diplomatic as it can get, but yeah, I think that's a good one. If not running real estate investing firm, which industry would you be in, and what kind of firm would you be running?
Yeah, so half of doing a business in India is about that business. The other half is about tax. So moving to India, I've been super involved in taxation, structuring, legality, compliance, and in fact, I really enjoy it. So I think if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I would have been a CA. But my passion in technology is parallel to that. So a CA and you can say a computer scientist maybe in parallel. But yeah, those are very interesting professions.
Awesome. I think we are done with a lighter note. We've had a great chat. Thank you for joining, Aryaman. I think this whole conversation has given users to think about the asset class, which is untouched in India and has a great potential considering this is the biggest asset class in the world. Thank you so much. Until next time, take care.
No, certainly. Thanks, Shreyans, for having me.
Awesome.